Everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in, and I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Dal Grunga, and I'm here with Vasudev Prabhu, coming at you live in New York. Vasudev had an early morning today service in the temple. He's our temple priest here at the Bhakti Center, and he's always engaged in some sort of selfless service. So this is probably like the later part of your day right now.
Well, it wasn't too late. I started at 6:30 today.
Started at 6:30. It's 6 a.m. for people on the West Coast right now. So they got us beat.
Cool, yeah.
We got people over in Oregon, in Seattle, got the Orgonauts. And so everyone's getting up early. Kimberly shifted camps from the West Coast to the East Coast. So she's on our time zone now. We're doing this live. It's 9 a.m. here. Not too bad. How are you otherwise? I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was nice. I liked it too.
Yeah.
What
What
was
was your
back to the basics of the Gita?
basics of the Gita? I mean, don't we just need it? Just to the basics of spiritual life. Like if we get those things right, so many things just when life is feeling out of alignment, it's usually because the basics just got neglected somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, you see bhakti practitioners who are advanced, they're always very, very strong in those basics. You look at their lives and they're like very strong in their chanting and their studies of the Gita, and they're hearing this message regularly in their service.
Why do you think that we drift? I cough a lot on this podcast. Sorry. Why do you think that we drift from that? If it's so, right? Srila Prabhupada made a statement once that that Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, the process is simple, but the application is difficult.
Yeah.
Right? And so why do you think that is, that we struggle to do the basic things?
Well, there's one verse in the Bhagavatam which says that the greatest obstacle, it's also a good one-liner, the greatest obstacle to spiritual life, to self-realization, is to think that something else is more important.
Wow. Fawcett's got all the one-liners here. Every day we've got one-liners. Yesterday it was, and I was quoting it this morning also in Bhagavatam class, that I'd rather face an uncomfortable truth than sit in a comfortable state of self-deception. Yeah, that's a good one. And today is, what was it again? I remember it, but I don't want to mess it up.
This is from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the instructions of the Kumaras to the King Prithu. And they tell him that the greatest obstacle to self-realization is to think that something else is more important. Because we have a certain amount of time, and of course we are very busy with things, so that is a genuine obstacle. But it's mostly I think an issue of valuing self-realization, having the urgency that spiritual realization is really the topmost priority for my life. And giving our maximum time and energy, even whatever time we have, that may even not be so much, but the more we consider that important, the more we'll put our energy into it and prioritize these things. Yeah.
I was trying to find that verse. I couldn't find it. I'm going to find it and reference for it at some point. That's really beautiful. Something else is more important. And I think that again, going back to the basics of the Gita, I think that Arjuna, in the midst of a lot of busyness, pause. This is something that your God brother Keshav Swami mentions, that even in the midst of before the battle was about to take place, Arjuna took that time to pause and to ask question, and if we don't take that time for ourselves, we're really doing ourselves a big disservice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about this question? Why the practice is not so difficult, but application is more difficult? What complicates things?
I think you nailed it. Something else more important. I think it also really comes down to this word that we don't always like to use so much, but faith. Like where am I putting faith? The word shraddha in Sanskrit for faith means, where am I giving my heart? And I
Yeah.
think that we've all given our heart somewhere. Sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. But we're all looking for the same thing. And I think that's an equalizing factor that,
Mhm.
Krishna mentions in multiple places in the Gita, that we should look upon all living beings equally. He mentions it in the 5th chapter, the famous verse that you see, whether it's an elephant or a dog or a human or an outcast of any type, you see somebody and you see them actually, like, even if somebody's socially, there's fitting somewhere in a social hierarchy, spiritually, actually, we all have a sense of equality. And then also he mentions in the 6th chapter, whether it's a well-wisher or an enemy, whether it's different types of people, to see them with some sort of an equal vision, that ultimately everyone's a spirit soul, and everyone's ultimately looking for the same thing.
Mhm.
Everyone's looking for love and connection to that higher source. And so we're all looking for the same thing. I just think that we have a different sense of where we think we're going to find it. And
Yeah.
when we neglect the basic things in our life, whether it even be our health, whether it be our relationships, whether it be our spiritual practice, there's some part of us that is unintentionally, unconsciously given my heart somewhere else, where I think actually I'm going to find some relief, some shelter, something somewhere else, or I'm lacking the faith that it actually is going to work, that I'm going to find it there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Why go through all the trouble to work on my health if it's not really going to matter at the end of the day anyways? Why go through all the trouble to work on relationships if I'm actually not going to, I think we develop some sort of sense of apathy. There's this principle in psychology called learned helplessness. Have you ever heard of it? But learned helplessness is
No.
where they would do tests, and that they would basically put test subjects into um, an impossible situation where something wouldn't work out, and then they would put them in. Trying to think of an example. I mean, not all of these tests are ethical, so it's hard to reference all of them. They were done a long time ago, you know. But like an example, they would. I give an example. These a lot of these tests are horrible and unethical. But anyways, like an example, like of a dog or an animal, and they would like put food in front of them, and every time the dog would go to get the food, they would give the dog some sort of shock or inflict some minor physical pain. And so the dog learned that if I go to get the food, I'm going to get some sort of shock or pain. And then they would remove the shockage. Like there'd be no impediment to go and get it anymore. And they'd put food in for the dog, and the dog wouldn't go to get it, even though there was no impediment. But they just learned, they learned helplessness. They learned that my endeavors never work out. And so even when the opportunity is there, and I think we learn a certain spiritual learned helplessness in life, where we get so disappointed by people and things and circumstances, it's hard for us to take up faith that, wow, like God's really going to come through for me. Krishna's on the other end of this chanting. Peace and fulfillment of this. I'm going to find myself through this practice. And I think we just become a little jaded, and we kind of become, a little, yeah, jaded.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not so often discussed, this obstacle of faithlessness and the different levels of faithlessness. It's going to be addressed later in this chapter, the 4th chapter of the Gita.
Hmm.
It says the agyascha, ashadadhanascha. Let me see, I forgot the verse actually. It says Sankshayatma vinashyati, that the ignorant, the person who knows scripture, someone who's ignorant of this wisdom, or those who know it, but they don't have much faith in it. So yeah, I have heard this, I know this. But, and then there's even those who have faith in it. They call it samshayatma. Those who have faith in it, they know, okay, this is true, and they may even have experiences of it, but they're doubtful. Samshayatma, they're doubtful people. And it's explained by the commentators. It's they doubt themselves, and they understand the truth, and the possibility, but they feel, but I cannot attain it. So they doubt themselves, and they doubt Krishna's grace. that Krishna is merciful enough that he will help those who strive sincerely. So, and then becomes very difficult to advance with it. And it's also hard to become happy in spiritual life, because we're committed to certain practices, and with that commitment, we also need to have a focus where we're going to go with it. Otherwise, it can become very discouraging, or very much kind of like you're going through the motions. So Chinanda Swami told me once that I at that time I was struggling a little bit in my sadhana, so in my practices, and he said, like, when you do your practice, you always have to keep the goal in mind. Otherwise, you're kind of like a dog, like, going after its own
We love
tail.
dogs on this show, by the way.
Yeah, so that's very important. To keep the goal in mind and have the faith that I can also attain it, because God is very merciful.
Yeah, well, it's so beautiful. I mean, I was looking at these verses. I'd love to read these verses together. I found them. It's chapter 4, 39 and 40. I appreciate so much your knowledge and scholarship of the Gita, Vasudev. It's very inspiring and refreshing. And that this word sadhana, I always think of this word sadhana in reference to the root of the word. You have the word sadhana, which comes from you have the word sadhya, sadhana, and sadhaka. These three words.
Yeah.
And sadhana is from this word sadhya, which refers to the goal. So first there's a sense of a goal. What am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to get at? And then there's a sense of a sadhana, which is a practice, a lifestyle that is meant to get me towards that place. And a lot of times we think of spiritual practices, spirituality, spiritual life, without a real clear sense of the sadhya. Like, what is the goal that I'm trying to achieve and to get at, and to be able to and I think we get caught up, and that's where I think we a lot of times get caught up in the rules, and why so many people get turned off to religion, because we just think like, oh, it's just a set of rules, but where is this leading? People are still, infested with bigotry and hatred and judgment and oppression. And, why do that? Because the sadhana, devoid of clear understanding of the sadhya, of the goal, I'm trying to become a lover of God. I'm trying to get rid of the greed and the envy and the vice in my heart. I'm trying to become more compassionate. I'm trying to get in touch with my true self and get rid of the layers of the ego. And sometimes if it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's so beautifully described that the seed, the love of God, bhakti, is like a seed that gets planted in the heart, and it's watered by the hearing and chanting of Krishna's names and of spiritual sound vibration. But if we're not careful, if we don't do it in the right mood, that very same watering can end up watering the weeds in our heart. And what are the weeds? The weeds are my pride, my envy, my jealousy, my enmity, my judgment towards others, my sense of superiority. And so our same spiritual practices, if we're not careful, can actually just water our ego. And so the practice itself, the sadhana, so to speak, is not the formula. It's the practice that's done in the proper mood to be able to assess, am I actually moving towards my goal? And so I think that having that goal in mind, and I think the goal has to be something that excites us. Sometimes I read that, if I'm feeling exhausted, sometimes I need rest, but sometimes I just need inspiration,
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily that I need a break, although sometimes we need breaks and we need to rest and we need to rejuvenate. But sometimes I'm exhausted just because I don't have something that's inspiring me in my life.
Yeah.
Something that I'm like willing to, like, at the end of the day, I feel tired, but I'm not exhausted. I feel energized about what I'm working towards. And so I love that reference of Satchidananda Swami and having that goal in mind, because I think it becomes essential. But it's hard to remind ourselves of that. But that's why we're here. Your daily spiritual check-in.
Like putting a little Sanskrit in here. The word sadhana and sadhya, sadhu, it all comes from the same root. The root is sad. It means to accomplish or to perfect in Sanskrit. So sadhana is the means to perfection. Sadhya is that which is to be perfected, or the goal. And the sadhu sadhu can be translated in different ways, but in the ultimate sense, it means one who is perfected, one who has attained that goal.
Yeah.
So that's why these people are so important, or like people who are very close to that, or advancing towards that, or even have their eyes very much fixed on that goal. They become very inspiring because they give us the hope and the faith that we can also do it.
Yeah. And I think that that becomes so essential in spiritual life, that we surround ourselves with the people that imbibe the outlook of life that we want to outlook on. It's something that we take for granted, I think, sometimes also when we watch a movie or watching a TV show or watching the news or reading the news or watching a sports game or whatever we're doing, we're associating with those people, you know?
Mm.
And we're just taking on that consciousness, like we're associating with those people, and we are assuming all of the values that are being held and expressed there. We don't think about it. It's insidious. It's subtle. It just kind of like it happens underneath the surface, but we're constantly absorbing the values of the people that we're associating with. And we don't just associate with the people that we physically sit down and have a conversation with. We're constantly absorbing the values of the culture and society that we immerse ourselves in. Somebody was just yesterday, somebody was telling me about somebody that they were following on social media that was like making them upset. Somebody that they don't know, some influencer, some teacher about something, and they were saying something and they didn't like it and didn't appreciate it and they felt attacked by it. And I was just thinking, I just said, why don't you just stop following them? As opposed to feeling you got to correct them, or you have to, find a way to defend yourself against what they're saying that's triggering you. It's like you get to choose the environment with which you surround yourself, physically and virtually. And I think that when we come to the place of like, this is the kind of person I want to be, how do I surround myself with people who are like that, are aspiring for the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge for us individually and also as a community, to provide that kind of sangha for people. Where we're very much focused on the goal, very much striving very seriously to.
Yeah.
So this is our individual challenge, and it's also a challenge as a community to create that kind of community of spiritual practitioners who are very, very intent and very conscious what they're doing. So yeah, it's not only for us, it's also for others that we need to, kind of step up to that game. But I also, it's also hard because there are days where you just, it's not all, when we're busy in the world, like for example, when I'm in a holy place like Vrindavan, it's not so difficult to kind of get in a very focused spiritual practice. But here with 3 meetings during the day and 8 hours of service, and have to also cook and clean and do your laundry, sometimes it becomes very hard to be very to have quality in every aspect of your practice. So and I also find it's important to see, it's a very nice statement by Prabhupada. Earlier on, you probably have discussed this in one of your earlier podcasts, which I take courage from. Let me just give me just a minute if I can. It's from Bhagavad Gita, the end of the 3rd chapter.
That the self is higher than the mind and the intelligence and etc.
No, this is just before that. It says those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. And then Prabhupada says, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle, and work sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness,
Mm.
he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness.
Mm.
So I like that, because it's not always possible to, live on the highest platform what we want to be. So, but we're not resentful of it. We're not, that's why it said in the verse, without envy. Like,
Mm.
we don't say like, oh, Krishna, why did you make it so difficult for us?
Mm.
Like, and then some kind of resentfulness can come in towards our spiritual practice, or towards Krishna, who we're trying to connect with through our spiritual practice. So we're just okay, I'm falling short. It's okay. We'll keep on going every day, another day. Keep on striving without hopelessness, and I'm not going to be defeated, not going to give up. And someday, and maybe this life, maybe next life, someday I'll get there.
Yeah. Um, you're referencing something that I've been wanting to ask you. I'm waiting for a segue, and I think you created it perfectly. But I wanted to prep it by sharing. This came up this morning also in a class before earlier, about the idea of people feeling not letting shame and guilt and resentment kind of build up and make us feel like we're not good enough or doing our spiritual practices properly enough. And I was thinking about how it's like when you go into a gym, right? If you go working out, you don't necessarily look for the biggest, heaviest weight in the entire gym and think, I need to lift that, right? Or you don't
Yeah,
go on the treadmill and think, what's the fastest setting on this treadmill? Well, the treadmill can go 32 miles an hour. Okay, hit it, you know? And it's like, you don't think, you don't see somebody who's been going to the gym for 30 years or is a gym rat, and they're just kind of there all the time, and they have a particular routine, and you think, I want to have that routine. It's like, okay, well, you can't start there. Or, you have to recognize, okay, this is your first time in the gym in a long time, or just your body, even your body has its limitations. It's only going to get so strong or so fast, etc. And I think that when we come to spiritual life, we just, okay, what's the ideal? What's the ultimate goal? I need to get there now. Next
yeah, and
week,
as
I
fast
need to,
as possible.
as fast as possible. And it's just like,
Ideally
okay,
by the end of this year.
the end of this year, right? And it's like, okay, wow, if you want to, if you approach like your physical health like that, like, yeah, you're going to hurt yourself. And I think
Yeah,
also, like, spiritually, we have to recognize, like, we're in a spiritual gym, and we're getting there. And it doesn't mean that I have to just think like, oh, I'm so far behind. It's like, wow, I feel a little stronger today. I'm not like, I can't say I'm in perfect health and that I'm Mr. Miss Universe and that I'm the perfect specimen of physical being. Take my photos and put it all over the place, but I feel stronger. I feel like I'm growing, and I think that's a huge principle. And this line, I wish I knew this line. I'm going to remember this line. It says that one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one's not resentful of this principle and work sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, they'll surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. I love that. I love that reference. It's powerful.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Very, very encouraging.
yeah. So the question I was going to ask, and we don't have time for it today because we're at time, but I always ask a question at the end and say, we'll bookmark it for the next day. And then I forget it the next day. And then we end up talking about something else, but maybe we'll actually answer this question tomorrow. Something that I've heard from you, Srila Prabhupada would say often, chant and be happy, right? And sometimes we see that as a sequential instruction, like to
Yeah,
chant, to do your sadhana, and as a result of it, be happy. But sometimes we're doing our sadhana and we're not happy. We're still struggling, and it's hard. Um, and I've heard you say that sometimes we can look at it as two separate instructions. That one is to chant, to perform our sadhana spiritual life, and simultaneously do what we need to in order to situate our lives in such a way that we're comfortable and happy enough. Otherwise, we won't be able to continue our spiritual practices because we'll be so caught up in the discomforts and sufferings of the material world, which are inevitable. And so I think that sometimes it can seem counterintuitive, or we feel guilty about recognizing our material needs without being excessive, so that we can situate ourselves in such a way that we can perform our sadhana peacefully. So I wanted to open that conversation up and hear more from you about that. But we're at time today, so we're going to bookmark that for tomorrow if we can
Okay, I'll
remember.
remind you.
Yeah, remind me and chew on it tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow, because I think
It's a great
that I
point.
think is where the rubber meets the road for so many of us, and I think you have a lot of realization on that. And I quote that often, and I remember hearing that. You remember you've said that, right? I'm not just pulling this out of the air.
I don't remember. I could have said it. I don't remember me saying that, but I've heard it before, and I may have. It doesn't come from. It's not my own original. If I said it, it's not my own original insight.
You've heard it
Heard it
before,
before.
right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
just
I
from
also
me.
reminded of Jai Jagannath, who was wearing a shirt said "Chant and be happy." ... Or at least chant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so bookmark for tomorrow. But that's the time we have today. And we're going to turn over to Kimberly, who's going to wrap it up for us and give us a few takeaways. And then we'll have some closing words from you and I, Vasudev. What you got for us, Kimberly?
All right, takeaways. The greatest obstacle to self-realization is to think that something else is more important. Asking ourselves, where am I giving my heart? Do your practice in the proper mood. Keep the goal in mind. Krishna is on the other end of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. What is your what's your closing word today, Vasudev? What are you walking away with and taking away from our conversation?
Well, I'm taking away a reminder to be intentional about practice. It's very easy to lose track of that. There's not an option to do so. It's just again and again showing up. And it was very nice to be reminded. Sometimes in these discussions, we're reminded of certain statements that just come up in our mind. That's the beauty of these kind of talks. We just like speak about certain spiritual subjects, and then thoughts come to mind for what we've heard, for what we realized. So I was very happy to be reminded of this statement by Prabhupada to strive without consideration of hopelessness and defeat. So I feel encouraged to again show up and enter the fight of spiritual life and focusing our attention on Krishna today.
Yeah. Matjata matkata prana bodhayantas parasparam. Krishna mentions about we enlighten each other by speaking about spiritual subjects. And I find that all the time, to just speak about something and things come to you, you remember something or a reference, and it's like, oh, I already knew that. Now I'm gonna keep that in my back pocket. And I think that's how important it is for also us to take the initiative in our spirit. It's a great question to ask spiritual friends. What are your realizations? What are you reading or studying these days? What have you been thinking about? How is Krishna showing up in your life? What's the struggle you're experiencing? And we just talk and converse, and things come up, and Krishna reciprocates by showing up and unveiling things, in the heart. And for me, I'm walking away with just the reminder that, because I'm very much an all or nothing person. I am that extremist that's just like walking to the gym and give me the heaviest thing to lift, and if I can't lift it, I'm leaving and canceling my membership. And just
I'm also kind of like
recognizing.
that.
What's that?
I'm also kind of like that.
Yeah, very much so. And I like to see big immediate results. And I think that to have faith in the small steps, and that actually, growth sometimes happens very much over time. And that, I like to be able to start practicing a new instrument and seeing how I'm good really quickly, as opposed to sometimes it just takes a steady practice every day for just a few minutes a day, and then in a year or two, I'm actually going to, your spiritual life is a long game. It's a long game. And it's a short game too. We experience things in the here and now that are beautiful, but it's also very much a long game. But if I'm not tending to it regularly, like I was hearing that there's a Chinese proverb, when is the best time to plant a tree? You heard that?
No, I haven't.
When's the best time to plant it? 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
The second best time is now. Second best time is now. And so it's like, okay, like second best time is now. You plant a tree, and it's you're not going to get mangoes tomorrow, but if you don't water it every day, you know, or if the rain isn't watering and nourishing it every day, then you're never going to get anything. But the faith is that by consistently each day, you know, the results will come. And so that's my takeaway and my reminder for myself today. And I really appreciate that. And the statement from Prabhupada is really beautiful. And I was also looking at those verses from the end of the 4th chapter. I wanted to read those. Maybe we'll get to those this week. And also the question that I ended to start off tomorrow. And so thank you, Vasudev, for the beautiful conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our live Zoom audience.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate being here with you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vasudev. Thank you, everybody. If you want to tune into our live Zoom audience and be part of the party, write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. If you ever have questions or topics that you want us to bring up and discuss on the show, write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. And please check out bhakticenter.org for all the other cool stuff that we've got going on virtually and in person. We'd love for you to stay connected. We appreciate you. We're grateful for you. Share something you heard with a friend. And we'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.